Hi there, you're watching Gardens and Graveyards. My name is Charisma, and today we're at the Eureka Cemetery and Mausoleum in Newport, Oregon. This cemetery was established in 1879. I have been managing the cemetery for just about 2 years, just over 2 years. And I thought it would be an interesting video to talk about how you can be buried in a cemetery. So this cemetery is still active. We have on average 1 burial per week, and we have multiple ways that you can be buried in this cemetery, and most cemeteries have these options available for you. And I just think that it's good for my audience and others to know that there are many options. Whatever aligns with your heart and desires, most cemeteries can accommodate those ways to be buried. I'm not going to get into, in this video, I'm not going to really be talking about how your body might be processed after the event of death, such as whether you're going to be embalmed or whether you're going to choose human composting versus cremation versus how do you say that? Aquamation, cremation by water, all those types of things. And there's other burial methods, obviously, that I won't be mentioning in this video. We'll probably do another video on like alternate fun ways to place the body after death. But today I'm just going to talk about some traditional spaces. So behind me, we have a mausoleum. This is a building that holds caskets. Each one of these squares that you see comes off of the building, and then the casket slides into the building, and then the square gets placed back on. There's a piece of plywood, and then there's the marble facing. And then we put a name plaque on the outside indicating who is buried there. There is room in our mausoleum to place at least 1, sometimes 2 urns along with the casket if that's something someone chooses to do. However, if you've already placed a casket inside of the mausoleum, we are not able to open the casket back up. Some funeral homes will work with families and you can place a loved one's ashes inside of a casket. So sometimes that happens, say a husband and wife pass away, one spouse is held onto the ashes and then the second spouse dies. The family sometimes chooses to place the ashes in the casket with the second loved one and then place them in the mausoleum. That's one option for more than one person to be in a mausoleum space. But typically, it's just a casket inside of the mausoleum. On the other side of this building, I'm getting there. On this side of the building, we have what's called niche wall. And that space is big enough to place 2 standard urns, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But each one of these, I'm gonna get a little bit closer and flip it around. Okay, so here is a closer look at the niche wall. So you can see these screws right here, and that whole panel will come out. All 4 of those niches will be exposed, and so each little square is 1 niche, and you can place up to 2 urns, standard urns, inside those spaces. And then most families choose to put a name bar and often a vase ring with a vase inside of it to commemorate their loved ones. Now, because we have a mausoleum and niche wall, we do not have a columbarium, which is just a more modern version of the niche wall where you can place the ashes of your loved ones. I'm not sure if columbariums hold more than 1 urn in them or not, because we just don't have one here, so I'm not familiar with it. Here is what the mausoleum looks like from across the cemetery, or at least across one section of the cemetery. The mausoleum was built in the 70s. You can definitely see that 1970s architectural feel about it. Now, the other standard way that you might bury your loved one is in a casket in the ground and commemorate them with what's called a flush marker or lawn marker. And that just means they're not raised up, they're just flush to the ground. And these lots accommodate one casket and up to 4 urns, or you can choose to have a lot and place up to 8 urns with no casket in it. So that is an option. As far as caskets go, there's many options. You can choose to have many different types of coffins or caskets. Coffins are usually a pine box, a plain pine box that has not been treated, and caskets are typically today made of fiberglass. They used to be made of metal, and there's definitely metal fittings on them to make them more fancy. There's enamel on them to make them shiny. There's many options. I'm not going to get into that today. We don't sell coffins or caskets here. We are just a cemetery and mausoleum, so we only bury the caskets and urns. But as far as the caskets go, what we do is we dig the grave and we place a grave box, either a liner or a vault. Both of these options are made of concrete. The liner has drainage holes in them, and the vault does not. It's airtight, it's air sealed, and that's an option that families sometimes choose to do. And then the casket is placed inside of the liner or vault, and we close the grave, meaning we put the dirt back up on top of the liner. The reason we use liners is to keep our grounds solid. You figure we have over 10,000 burials in this cemetery, and if we did not have those concrete liners, you would see, instead of this nice level grass, you would see sunken dips. And even with the liners, we're always having to top off our graves to ensure that we don't have those sunken spots, that we don't have, it's a safety hazard. We don't want our lawnmowers or tractors getting, stuck or flipped over in super uneven ground. And that's just a struggle that every cemetery has. Some cemeteries choose not to do the concrete liners, and they have to constantly fill in those graves. We have very sandy soil in most of our cemetery because we're so close to the ocean, and that would be a really big struggle for us if we didn't have those concrete liners. There is the option of a green burial. Now, the green burial, we would still need to have the concrete liner, but if you wanted the body to be touching soil, we could place the body into the grave and flip a liner upside down on top of them with no lid, so that we could create structure for the ground. That is one way that we can accommodate green burials. Let's see, did I cover all of them? Caskets in a casket in a liner or a vault, or in the mausoleum. Cremation in the ground or the niche wall. Another way that you can bury someone in the average cemetery is in a scattering garden. Many cemeteries have scattering gardens. Our cemetery has these sweet little granite pieces all the way around the scattering garden that you can purchase and have engraved with your loved one's information. And then inside of the scattering garden, we can accommodate either urns that are biodegradable, some that are made out of Himalayan salt and cardboard, that type of thing. We can place those in the ground there, or we can just bury the actual physical ashes into the ground, which is what most families choose to do. Now, when people talk about scattering their ashes, most people have this idea of we're just gonna open up a bag and toss them. No, no, no. That can be very messy and quite disturbing. Coat all the plants, and your loved one's ashes might not be the thing that you want to do. So what we typically encourage families to do is actually dig a little hole and place the ashes inside of that hole. The other way that you can put ashes is you can purchase a bench, something like this. The top will come off, it's sealed, but you can pop it off, place your loved one's urns, and they typically only are big enough for a standard urn, which your funeral home will provide. And this, for example, this bench holds 6 urns, and because basically it holds 3 little there's 3 niches in there, and they're tall enough for 2 urns. So that is also an option that families can choose to do. The other thing that we do at our cemetery is we offer families memorial trees. So you can purchase a space and a tree to plant, and then put a plaque or something of that nature to commemorate your loved ones. Those living memorials are not guaranteed. If the tree fails, the family has to purchase a new one. I think we guarantee it for like a few years. Like if it's a seedling tree, we'll replace it. But if it's a mature tree, you know, there's a life on those. So choose wisely and talk to your cemetery about whether that's an option that they have for you. We also will allow families to place urns or scatter their ashes around their living memorial trees, so long as you let your cemetery know that you're doing that, so that they can document who has been buried with their cemetery. Of course, we can't forget our favorite way to commemorate loved ones, or at least my favorite way, is through an upright marker. And in our cemetery, this is the original sections of the cemetery, and we only allow the upright markers to go in this area opposed to the newer sections. And that is simply for the ease of maintenance and mowing. You can imagine that it's far easier to drive our lawnmower over these flush markers and in between them than it is to go in between all of these upright markers, especially since in the olden days they weren't as careful about creating straight lines with the markers. So some of them are kind of like in the middle of the field, which makes it a little bit more difficult. And of course we have to weed eat around each marker to keep them, you know, nice and tidy and maintained. So at some point, and I don't remember what year, at some point the board decided that we were no longer going to have upright markers in the new sections. Another option that some cemeteries have that we do not have is an ossuary, which we've talked about putting right up there where that bench is, and kind of a patio and a rock. And an ossuary is basically a very, very large vessel that's placed underneath the ground and has access from on top of the ground, where you essentially just pour ashes of your loved ones down into the vessel, and it can hold hundreds of cremains. And there's different size ossuaries and there's different functions of them, but we have not built one for our cemetery at this time. So that's it in a nutshell, the different ways that you can be buried in most cemeteries. I encourage you to get out to your local cemetery or your favorite cemetery, find out if there's space available, and make some decisions about how you would like to spend eternity, how you would like your body to spend eternity in the ground or scattered, or all the many different ways that you can be buried. And if you choose a local cemetery, I hope and encourage you to go check it out, see what kind of options there are, and support your cemetery by pre-purchasing your plots, pre-purchasing your headstones. This gives you more control over what happens to you after you pass away, and it helps your local cemeteries and your favorite cemeteries continue thriving. And I hope that inspired you to get into your cemeteries and think a little bit about how these people have chosen to place their loved ones in the ground or scattered or into a building in a mausoleum, and all the thoughts that have to go into making those decisions for yourselves and your loved ones. But until the next video, I hope that you keep living life to the fullest, and we will see you next time. Make sure you like and subscribe and stay tuned for more informative videos about cemeteries and gardens, because this is my passion and my joy, and I just love sharing with all of you. Bye.